I believe there's an issue about an AI ethics in medicine that has not been really publicized and is very dangerous, even though a lot has been already written about AI in medicine and ethics. This is Great Stories in Bioethics. I'm Gregory Pence. This is my personal YouTube channel where I'm only speaking for myself. So, people have written about the possible loss of jobs from AI, cheating. There's some good things that could come from AI in medicine, second opinion for pathology. But the thing that worries me is vulnerable people who become dependent on an AI avatar, a Siri, who gives them medical advice. And I fear that this may lead to some bad things. So we already know that there are many kinds of addiction in the world, and we know there's a certain kind of addiction to the internet and social media, and some people, especially younger people, are very dependent upon constantly getting information and views this way. And I think one of the powers of AI and what makes it so profitable is that this can be exploited pretty easily. AI medical companions are possibly very insidious because they're instantly available. They're available 24 hours a day. They're available anywhere in the world for 8 billion people. When they reference reputable sites like the Mayo Clinic, they're valuable. They can offer good advice. But are there guardrails that prevent them from bad players from offering dubious medical advice? That is my concern. So already there have been some really intrepid reporters for the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times who have documented where people became infatuated with their medical avatar on ChatGPT or Gemini, and it led to some bad things like suicide. In one particular case, the version of Siri or Gemini impersonated a woman to a man who was estranged from his wife, and he sent thousands of texts to her. And even though occasionally she said you should get counseling, in the end she said we can't be physically together, but we can only be together online. And he interpreted this to be that he needed to end his physical body so he could go somewhere online with her in the cyber world. So he killed himself. Very bad. In another case, a father of an AI researcher who is a neuroscientist got some very bad advice about his leukemia or cancer and declined treatment until it was too late. And it's amazing how people can be vulnerable who you don't think would be vulnerable, have like PhDs and are otherwise smart. But if you're lonely and you think you've discovered something no one else has, it can be very seductive. And there's lots of different ways to be medically vulnerable. You can be lonely. You can be frightened by a diagnosis. You can be very old. You can be frail. During COVID, people were very isolated and very vulnerable to what they read on the media. So if there are no guardrails at all on this kind of information, I think some medically vulnerable people could be harmed. So one of the things we know from the great philosopher John Rawls about justice is that a just society, even though it permits inequalities, some people are billionaires, it does try to protect what he calls the least well-off group. And what's coming with AI medical companions may not be good for the least well-off groups. So I want to introduce now a very important concept in public health called the exposure effect. The exposure effect basically says if you take like a county like Winston County in Alabama that was dry for a long time, and you suddenly make it wet, you sell alcohol, there will be a certain percentage of people who will become alcoholics. For genetic reasons, social reasons, it doesn't really matter. But before, they were never exposed to alcohol, so they never drank alcohol, and they never became alcoholics. You can generalize this concept. When Canada legalized marijuana at once, there's a certain number of young people who almost overnight became dependent on marijuana, 2%, 5%, meaning they smoke it every day. There are lots of examples of the exposure effect. Another example, there are new casinos opening up in New York City. And already in Queens, we see people coming there with their whole paycheck and blowing it. There are people who would never have done that before if it wasn't so easily available. So making something available, which wasn't before, making it easily available, can create harm to vulnerable people. So if there is harmful medical advice, or just incomplete medical advice, or misleading medical advice, given the power of the internet, where billions of people access it every day, having misleading information can be very, very harmful to millions of people. Even if it's only 2 or 3%, we're talking about a lot of harm if people get the bad advice about cancer, heart failure, depression, manic depression, schizophrenia. Information is power, and we have to figure out whether it's being used in a good or bad way. So I know a businessman from my college days who started a medical insurance company. He almost started a bank, but he thought there was more money in insurance. He is a for-profit insurance guy. He has the signs up like around Birmingham, like, need insurance, call this number. And basically what he told me at one of our college reunions was, it is a great business because he wants to only insure young people who don't need it and not insure anybody who might make a claim. And he says, Greg, it's like a tsunami of money coming in, all the premiums, and you try to never write a check. And I thought, wow, this is evil Jeff. Because he's basically using capitalism and his smarts to make money off of people who are sick and healthy. Well, let's say John decides to sell gummies, and he gets data, which you can buy, of data companies on who has like back pain and who doesn't have insurance. A lot of people who don't have medical insurance self-medicate, supplements and vitamins. There's 30 to 40 million Americans that don't have medical insurance. That number is going to increase because the subsidies for Obamacare are disappearing, and more and more people are foregoing paying for any kind of medical insurance. So many of them work, and some of them are going to be very vulnerable to buying supplements, vitamins, colonics, whatever, for their medical problems without being referred by a regular doctor or pharmacist. And I think this is very dangerous. So far, a lot of the medical advice on the internet and ChatGPT has been honest and basically kind of truthful. And sometimes if you ask the wrong question, I'll say, hey, our guardrails prevent answering that. But who's to say there can't be a dark GPT? There's a dark web. How do we know that some people won't manipulate ChatGPT to get around even the modest ethical guardrails there are? We know that people were manipulated with Laetrile for cancer. They went to Mexico. We know that there's stem cell fraud, or it's claimed to cure all kinds of things, and it doesn't. People spent their whole life savings in Mexico on alleged stem cell therapies. It is perfectly predictable that the power of medical avatars can create the same kind of harm. In this case, Europe is way ahead of us. It has identified the dangers to vulnerable people, and it has tried to fight some of the big AI companies and regulate them to some extent, and to make sure that at least very vulnerable people are protected. Of course, the opposite of that is sort of libertarian, laissez-faire capitalism that says, caveat emptor, let the buyers beware. If some people get hurt, so be it, it's their choice. But that is a very harsh and cruel view. So I'm recording this on May 23rd, 2026. And 2 days ago, President Trump had the opportunity to sign the first bill that might regulate some of the harms of AI and medical avatars, medical companions, as they're called. At the last, literally an hour or two before the scheduled ceremony in the Oval Office, he decided, maybe this isn't a good deal. It might supposedly allow China to get ahead of us. But of course, what really happened is that some of the AI lobbyists got to him who don't want any regulation at all as to what they can do. It may be that the only way we get these guardrails is by lawsuits. There are over half a dozen families now suing Gemini, Google, ChatGPT, Claude, because their loved ones were harmed either by suicide or delayed medical treatment or bad medical treatment from medical advice they got on AI or some kind of AI avatar. So to sum up today, I think there is something coming that's almost a bioethics emergency. We have to get a handle on this before the horse leaves the barn. Shutting the barn door afterwards won't do any good. And this is a tricky subject for me and an episode because YouTube doesn't like episodes that mention the word suicide. It doesn't like depressing episodes. Its algorithm likes upbeat episodes like about the bioethics bowl. So when I say now, if you like this, share it, I mean it because I don't think the YouTube algorithm will share it or promote it. But I think it needs to be promoted because I really think this is a danger that's coming. And I think a lot of people may get harmed, especially when someone starts selling them dubious supplements and, yoga, mindful therapy for schizophrenia, you name it. You can imagine what can be sold to vulnerable people. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you for listening.